Heyo and welcome to How Would You Build, a little series in which I take your favorite characters from fiction, fantasy, and all forms of media and attempt to build them in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. In this series, we'll be using all source books from Wizards of the Coast except the 2024 revision of the Player's Handbook. If you have any suggestions for characters, make sure to drop them in the comments, join the Discord to post an official request on the DnD channel, or ask me directly on my coffee. Additionally, the full character build written down with backstory suggestions and the level 20 character sheet will be there as well, free for everyone. In this episode, we will be building the Honored One, the Limitless 6 Eyes user, Gojo Satoru. This build will contain spoilers for the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen, so if you haven't gone through the anime or the manga, I thoroughly recommend that you give them a try, because if you couldn't tell, I do quite like the show. If you don't care about spoilers though, or if you're all caught up, we will try our best to build this positively all-powerful character as close as possible to what we see in JJK. This means that we want a character who is an arrogant, all-seeing, but alluring-looking master of cursed energy, jujutsu, and martial arts to a near unbeatable degree. We want Satoru Gojo to be nearly impossible to effectively damage by conventional means, and to dish out insane, usually area of effect, spells with extreme destructive potential. Additionally, we want his speed, power, and awareness to be unmatched thanks to his manipulation of blue and his innate 6 eyes. Finally, we also want Gojo to be able to entrap enemies within his domain expansion, Unlimited Void, and we want that domain to be closer to a Saver Suck than other domains we have done before. Our foes inside the domain will be overloaded with information and have their brains reduced to mush, rendering most spellcasters absolutely powerless to a little head removal. Before we continue with the build, to honor the Honored One getting built on the channel and to thank each and every one of you for coming to watch my builds, I will be giving away a discount code of 100% for all JJ characters I have built on my coffee to one of you. To participate, all you have to do is tell me about your most breathtaking, overpowered moments you've had in D&D down in the comments below, and include the word Teddy in it as well. I will announce the winner and read your stories in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. But now, without further ado, let's get to building Gojo, the Honored One. For Gojo's ability scores, we will be generating them using the Starter Array. We'll begin by putting a 15 in Dexterity and a 14 in Intelligence. Gojo's early life has afforded him extensive training and a lot of studying with the Gojo clan, and so both of these scores will become Gojo's primary abilities and will remain quite high throughout the builds. But remember that these numbers are just guidelines to start the build with. Next, we have 13 in Wisdom and 12 in Charisma. Gojo is extremely charismatic due to his looks, but personality-wise he has what it takes to be a villain in many cases. His threats come with the weight of his power, not necessarily of his demeanor. Wisdom at 13, along with the starting feat that we will take for our race, will be Gojo's massively potent starting passive perception. After all, he has the ability to perceive others at extreme distances, and people like Toji, experts in stealth, still struggle to remain hidden long against Gojo, even as a child. Constitution and Strength will be dumped at 10 and 8 respectively. While Gojo shows some measure of strength and looks ripped, his power mostly comes from his technique and the control over space and time that it affords. His resilience also comes from his technique and decades of honing his combat senses, which we will cover with classes, spells, and feats. After all, your health doesn't matter all that much if spells poof away, breath weapons don't even scratch you, and melee attacks struggle to hit you anyway. For Gojo's race, we are going to be building him as a variant human. This choice of race grants us an increase in intelligence and dexterity by 1 point each, and a bonus proficiency in perception. Additionally, for the feat, we will also grab observant and bump our intelligence by 1 more point. Gojo is an exceptional human being, that much is obvious, and he was also born with the 6 eyes. To mimic his extreme perception, we get him proficiency in the same skill, and we get the observant feat to round out his intelligence and ensure he can only be surprised by the most well-prepared of assassins. Under most conditions, Gojo, even in his youth, was a boy gifted with unhindered sight. For Gojo's background, we are going to be choosing the Noble One. This grants us proficiency in history and persuasion, along with a gaming set of your choice. If video games exist, you probably want to give Gojo a handheld console. For languages, pick the most common language in your setting after common, as the writer of JJK did say that Gojo speaks a little bit of English. For For equipment, we will have fine clothes representing Gojo's expensive shirts and outfits other than the main Jujutsu Tech outfit. A signet ring could be a family heirloom from the Gojo clan, which Gojo has put away since it doesn't matter all that much to him, along with a scroll of pedigree, which could simply be a fancy ID or passport of some kind that reveals his important nature to officials or security personnel. Lastly, we get 25 gold to get Gojo started on his Jujutsu journey, along with essentially unlimited family funds when he can become the head of his family. For the feature of his background, he will have position of privilege. Gojo was always treated with extreme care, attention, and any means available to his extremely powerful family. His life was always his needs being put first, along with being on top of bounty boards essentially since birth. And with this background feature, we will do justice to such a life. For Gojo's levels, we begin with a first level of Monk. This gives us proficiency in simple weapons and short swords, along with proficiency in strength and dexterity saving throws. For skills, we also obtain acrobatics and insight, and for equipment, we will have a quarterstaff to represent the first weapons that we will give to a young, still unrealized Gojo, an explorer's pack so that young Gojo can wander the world curiously when he develops his neutral application of Limitless, and 10 darts to simply be a mechanical aid for deadly level 1 settings. In terms of abilities at this level, we get Unarmored Defense, the start of our AC at 14, which is not particularly amazing, but with Uncanny Perception, Gojo keeps himself out of trouble. After all, a child noticing an expert assassin is usually enough to put them on the back foot. Our second ability will be Martial Arts. Gojo has trained in his clan to develop his fighting abilities. Even without cursed energy, he displays proficiency in martial arts while unarmed. This makes his fighting abilities mostly revolve around not using weapons to great effect. At level 2, we get Gojo another level of Monk, and this grants us unarmored movement, bumping Gojo's movement speed to an additional 10 feet as Gojo begins to understand how to use blue to increase his speed combined with more refined applications of Limitless, so that we can reach ridiculous speeds later down the line. Additionally, at this level, we also get E, a little pouch of tricks stemming from intense martial arts training. For now, these involve using the dodge action as a bonus action, but later on, we will incorporate 2 additional punches into a deadly melee combatant with several buffs. Dedicated Weapon, which is our third and final feature, isn't particularly important since Gojo doesn't really use weapons, but if your setting is still just as deadly at this level, feel free to have a ranged weapon used to preserve your health. At level 3, we finally multi-class into a first level of Wizard. This grants us Arcane Recovery, which will be flavored as Gojo once per short rest or long rest, recovering his curse techniques. For now, Gojo can recover burnt out techniques with an elaborate use of his cursed energy and later his reverse curse technique. This could also be flavored as an extreme well of cursed energy that is essentially very hard to exhaust. First level wizards also get access to a spellbook. While this setting doesn't particularly use spellbooks, Gojo can simply learn applications of his technique through the records passed down by the Gojo clan. This guidebook, as he called it during his second fight with Tochi. Along with some improvised interpretations like Hollow Purple, Gojo can absolutely apply his technique to achieve effects like teleportation, extreme speed, extreme toughness, regeneration, and punching holes through enemies by force alone. For spell casting, we get a lot of spells at this level, but for cantrips, we get Firebolt, Gust, and Lightning Lure. Firebolt and Gust will represent our 2 applications of red. Sometimes, when Gojo shoots red, it seems to either push back or burn enemies, like when it hit Mahoraga. And other times, the burn could simply be caused by being pushed and air friction. Lightning Lure, on the other hand, represents here the power to attract with blue. If the enemy gets hit, they are pulled and then take damage when within 5 feet of Gojo. We will flavor this as the enemy being pulled towards Gojo and hitting the neutral state of Limitless quite hard. For spells, we get Detect Magic, False Life, Mage Armor, Shield, Silvery Barbs, and Thunderwave. Detect Magic will represent Gojo's initial ability to see the flow of cursed energy naturally, which we can do for free since it's a ritual spell. Just take 10 minutes to focus. Then, False Life, Mage Armor, Shield, and Silvery Barbs all represent the neutral application of Limitless. The temporary hit points preventing damage, Mage Armor's heightened AC preventing direct hits, Shield and Silvery Barbs also acting as failsafes by repelling stronger attacks with a stronger force. As a note for using the complicated spell, Silvery Barbs, make sure to use it only when a saving throw needs to stick on an enemy, or in the event of a critical hit, or when an attack is about to bring someone important down. Thunderwave, finally, is another much more damaging application of red, or arguably blue. to push or pull away with a blast of force. At level 4, we get a second level of wizard. This grants us our subclass, School of Abjuration. At this level, School of Abjuration only grants us one ability, which is the Arcane Ward. This is neutral limitless. For now, the damage the ward can absorb is small, since it's twice our wizard level plus our intelligence, but as we level up and gain more interesting defensive options, this ward will become nigh unbreakable. Worthy of note, the ward stacks with temporary hit points, since it's just another pool of separate hit points. For spellcasting, we add the two spells Identify and Absorb Elements. Identify continues our journey in the world of giving Gojo all the information from his environment that he can have. After all, 6 eyes allows that much. Spend some time looking into an object to find a pattern in the cursed energy, and now you know what it does. Absorb Elements represents the neutral limitless being able to ward off even much of the brunt of techniques a torrent of fire usually does require. Dexterity saving throws after all. At 5th level, we get a 3rd level of wizard, and this grants us cantrip formulas. If your DM allows homebrewed spells like that of Kibbles, Laser Llama, Matthew Mercer's Graviturgy, or the Middle Finger of Vecna, or some other creator, make sure to ask if it's okay to make the switch on the long rest. Effectively, with preparation, any cantrip can be used as a flavor of Limitless. Personally, I would stick with cantrips that deal thunder or force damage, but options like Radiant, Fire, or even physical damage types work just as well. For spells, we finally get slots of 2nd level, and we obtain the spells Misty Step and Blur. Misty Step for now is a good use of teleportation for Gojo, since he routinely uses blue to move at extreme speeds, and to many, it looks like Gojo is just kind of teleporting around. Blur expands on that and makes Gojo's speed add to his already strong defense by using both blue and neutral limitless. Particularly during the fight with Sukuna, Gojo was so fast he was leaving after images of himself. At level 6, we get another level of wizard, and now we get an ability score increase or a feat. We will get skill expert and bump our wisdom by 1 point. With this feat, we get proficiency in intimidation, since Gojo has already been building a reputation with this technique and the 6 eyes, so even disaster curses like Chogo are already terrified and quite weary of the sorcerer when they get the first taste of the Satoru beatdown. Additionally, for expertise, we get it in perception, adding our proficiency bonus twice to our perception skill checks and our passive perception scores. Currently, that means Gojo sports a perception skill of +8 and a passive perception of 23, making even the most proficient of rogues and assassins have a hard time avoiding detection by the user of Limitless. For spells, at this level we get another slot of 2nd level, and we get access to one new cantrip, Thunderclap. Thunderclap will simply be Gojo squishing the air and creating pressure around himself to explode with booming force, damaging enemies all around him. For leveled spells, we get See Invisibility and Dark Vision. Gojo has access to the 6 eyes, and while it affords him vision over the flow of cursed energy, we can also argue that it gives him sight of invisible enemies and of darkness. See Invisibility and Dark Vision allows for both of these abilities to shine through. At level 7, we get a 5th level of Wizard, and this grants us 3rd level spell slots. At this level, we get Glyph of Warding and Fly. Glyph of Warding is essential to prepare buffs and set up Gojo's domain expansion. For now, we can put Blur and Fly as the 2 spells of choice, rendering Gojo nearly impossible to hit for most creatures with a little bit of preparation. Fly is an obvious choice, as Gojo defies gravity itself with the use of his curse technique after all, and likes to hang upside down when fighting opponents. Make sure to flavor this flight, as Gojo actually either walking on the air itself or kind of just phasing up or to the left and around the battlefield. An important note as well is that when you cast this spell, your speed becomes 60 feet, so you are essentially under a constant dash action. At level 8, we get a 6th level of Wizard, and this grants us the ability Projected Ward. Gojo can use his extreme speed, heightened reflexes, and various techniques to keep friends within 30 feet safe when they are about to be dropped. Otherwise, for your version of Gojo in 5th edition, make sure to be mindful to keep most of your power to keep you, above all, safe. For spells, we get another slot of 3rd level, and we get the spells Haste and Hypnotic Pattern. We are now ready to unleash Gojo's power with this mighty level. Haste provides Gojo, when combined with Fly, a 120-foot flying speed, along with 2 attacks and increased AC saving throws. Make sure to store this spell in a Glyph of Warding. Hypnotic Pattern, on the other end, provides Gojo with a starter version of his domain expansion. Enemies caught in it are visibly dazed and kind of sit around doing nothing until Gojo makes contact with them. At level 9, we get a 7th level of Wizard, and this grants us our 4th level spell slots. But oddly enough, for this level we will not get 4th level spells. Instead, we are going to get Blink and Counterspell. Gojo is quickly gathering what he needs for his domain expansion, but for now, we must stay alive long enough to practice, and Counterspell ensures that we can just swat away the techniques of disaster curses when they get too troublesome. After all, they are far too weak to bypass Limitless. On the other end, Blink is another application of blue, allowing Gojo to use his extreme speed to disappear right before an enemy attacks, and then reappear at a point close to where he originally was. At this level, we can have a powerful buffing routine before a particularly deadly fight to achieve some of the defensive mastery afforded by the Limitless technique. So for this buffing routine, you will need 2 glyphs of warding, and you will begin by placing Haste in a 4th level glyph of warding, and Blur in a 3rd level glyph of warding. Make sure to precast Blink, See Invisibility, and then either Fly or Hypnotic Pattern to deal with how an enemy tries to get an edge on you, no matter if they try to fly, go invisible, or even summon allies. While this buffing routine might be extremely defensive in nature, Gojo is threatening first and foremost because of his neutral Limitless. After all, there is nothing worse than an enemy that you cannot hit reliably. At level 10, we get an 8th level of Wizard, and we get the feat Artificer Initiate. Gojo, after all, knows his way around cursed tools after his encounter with Toji, and has become weary of the Inverted Spear of Heaven and tools of that kind. The near-death encounter with him granted him a couple of spells as well. For the cantrip, we get Guidance. A whole youth of trauma has afforded Gojo a lot of perspective, and he can usually share this perspective with others and guide them to make better choices. He can also be reminded of his mistakes and use them to motivate his choices later down the line. If your pupils are being particularly reckless with their own lives, make sure to give them a forehead flick as you cast Guidance. The first level spell we obtain is Cure Wounds. Gojo cannot heal anyone but himself, so with this new revelation in mind, he can heal his body after being left to do death saves by an overleveled Toji. For extra flavor, make sure you keep this spell in your back pocket until Toji fights and puts you at death's door. Get your Hollow Purple ready and blast that pesky Heavenly Restriction Zenin into the afterlife. For spellcasting, we get another slot of 4th level, and at this level we get Mirror Image and Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum. Mirror Image is another application of blue. As we have said before, Gojo was so extremely fast during his Sukuna fight that he created after images of himself, rendering enemies hitting him nearly impossible. Private Sanctum represents the beginning barrier for Gojo's domain expansion, Unlimited Void. For now, his domain simply prevents creatures from escaping by teleporting, with a few other spells. At level 11, we get a 9th level of Wizard, and this grants us another slot of 4th level and 1 slot of 5th level. Spells we obtain will then be Wall of Force and Hold Monster. With Wall of Force, Private Sanctum, and Hold Monster, we now have a stronger domain for Gojo. His foe is effectively paralyzed without any means to receive reinforcement from people outside Wall of Force. Since both the Wall and the Sanctum block physical travel, ethereal travel, and teleportation, we will be able to put together a more viable domain to deal with an enemy one-on-one on our next level. For now, we cast Private Sanctum, and then Hold Monster. At level 12, we get another level of Wizard, and this grants us the Abjuration Wizard ability called Improved Abjuration. Let your foes cast their mighty techniques and Jujutsu powers. You alone are the honored one, and with a +8 to your check to dispel or counterspell Jujutsu techniques, while upkeeping the neutral form of Limitless, very, very few enemies deserve Gojo's worry. For spells, we get another slot of 5th level, and at this point we get Dispel Magic and Teleportation Circle, along with the cantrip Mending. Mending is for when you get hit with devastating attacks that catch you off guard, like a wild Toji surprise attacking. We have to make sure that Gojo's clothes don't suffer when he uses the reverse curse technique, and with Mending we can repair them in a pinch. Dispel Magic, along with improved Abjuration and Counterspell, both mean that Gojo can simply deny techniques by applying extreme force generated by Limitless. Teleportation Circle represents that one time when you have to send some of your students to Jujutsu Tech to fight your former best friend turned cult leader. Draw that circle by searing it with your technique on the ground and zip those newbies right over there. At level 13, we get an 11th level of Wizard, and at this point we get 6th level slots. We finally get Sunbeam and the spell Disintegrate. We come to Hollow Purple, and we have 2 forms of it. The first one is the obvious one. It is Disintegrate, where we prepare the fly swatting and deliver a Jujutsu-fueled flick that turns Toji into the apple symbol, or reduces anyone else into a pile of fine dust. The saving throw, being Dexterity, allows even foes like Hanami to get a lucky break and barely avoid being wiped. Sunbeam means that Gojo holds a mote of Hollow Purple, which is daylight, and shoots it in a line, reducing foes to literal burnt cinders. The damage being radiant actually somewhat matches the damage done to Sukuna later down the line, where it looks like it caused burn marks. At this level, We can also have both Hold Monster and Wall of Force as part of our domain expansion, while adding Private Sanctum to prevent teleportation out of it. At level 14, we get another level of Wizard. This grants us an ability score increase, which we will use to bump Gojo's intelligence. We're slowly reaching the pinnacle of Gojo's spellcasting power, and spells become more powerful and DCs are more difficult to resist at this point. At this level, we get no more slots, but we do get 2 additional spells in the form of True Seeing and Globe of Invulnerability. True Seeing is the final state of the 6 eyes of Gojo. With it, you're able to see through darkness, illusions, invisibility into the ethereal plane and transformed creatures. For now, we can't put it in a glyph of wording, but if your DM allows transporting them, make sure you keep some of these handy. Globe of Invulnerability represents Gojo using a simple domain to resist Sukuna's domain expansion. Spells and abilities can be thrown out of it, but not into it. For Gojo's domain expansion, Unlimited Void, we just gained a way to become immune to the effects of casting Hypnotic Pattern on ourselves or our allies. At level 15, we get a 13th level of Wizard, and at this point we get a slot of 7th level. Along with it, we also get the spells Tensor's Transformation and Whirlwind. Finally, we obtain our first use of maximum output, Blue, creating a vacuum in a point that sucks everything in and crushing it with Whirlwind. Bonus points if you have this spell move around you as well. At this level, with a good buffing routine, we also have obtained access to a highly proficient Gojo in melee combat, using Tensor's Transformation along with stacking Glyph of Warding buffs like Fly and Haste to truly make it nearly impossible to retaliate or outrun Gojo, as we see when Miguel tried to escape the Honored One. Additionally, the average damage of a punch under Tensor's Transformation is 18.5 for Gojo, which can one-shot most transfigured humans produced by Mahito using the Summon Lesser Demon spells, as we have covered in his specific build. At level 16, we get a 14th level of Wizard, which grants us the ability Spell Resistance. Jujutsu is powerful, that is true, but there exists just an infinity of space between the skills of other sorcerers and that of the Honored One. They need extreme power to even begin to scratch the most powerful sorcerer of the modern times, and so granting him advantage against spells, resistance to damage from spells, and a long list of powerful defensive options to pick from, not much is getting through to Gojo anymore. For spells at this level, we also get Fizban's Platinum Shield and Teleport. Teleport completes Gojo's abilities fueled by Blue, allowing him to zip between Jujutsu Tech and a small lake in the middle of nowhere in an instant to grab Yuji for a demonstration. Fizban's Platinum Shield represents another defensive option to ward away creatures that rely on breath weapons and other nasty, non-magical dexterity saving throws. Make sure to put in a glyph of warding in between long rests and keep it cozy for a particularly powerful enemy. To flavor this spell, we can consider it to be Falling Blossom Emotion. If you would rather have a lower level option though than Platinum Shield, you can grab Otiluke's Resilient Sphere instead. At level 17, we get a 15th level of Wizard, and at this point we get access to 8th level spells. We get Sunburst and Feeble Mind. Sunburst is an unlimited Hollow Purple that Gojo uses when he just has to obliterate an area around himself. He can also catch himself in it, just like how unlimited Hollow Purple blew him up too in the manga. Feeble Mind completes, in part, Gojo's domain expansion with the possibility of simply overloading an enemy with all the information provided by the 6 eyes. Used against Jujutsu sorcerers, it essentially means an instant loss because of how it damages the opponent's brain, leaving them unable to use Jujutsu to cast spells. Along with other spells and abilities, Gojo can then use this moment to finish off his opponent really easily. At level 18, we get a 16th level of Wizard, and this grants us our final bump by 2 points in intelligence. Gojo is the strongest, and with being the strongest comes a maxed out spellcasting ability score, so that his Jujutsu is like none other, and his understanding of how cursed energy acts and influences the world at the atomic level can be mastered to an extreme degree. Not to mention, Gojo can understand distortions in space, dilation and contraction of time, along with infinite series, concepts that he brings out several times, including during fights. In terms of spellcasting, we also obtained the 2 spells of Maddening Darkness and Mind Blank. Maddening Darkness represents another form of Gojo's domain expansion, which we can't use just yet since it affects us. Or, if we can use Mind Blank within the same 24 hours of casting Maddening Darkness, along with this newfound immunity to psychic damage of the darkness, we can also cast True Seeing and suddenly be able to see in the Maddening Darkness while our foe repeatedly takes psychic damage in pitch black with no hopes of escaping our unlimited void, enclosed in a wall of force and in a private sanctum. As is obvious, this setup for a domain expansion could be made a lot easier if you put some of these spells inside glyphs of wording, as we have done for previous builds. At level 19, we get a 17th level of Wizard, and we finally get access to 9th level spell. We begin the 9th level spells with Invulnerability and Psychic Scream. When faced with powerful but not particularly gifted magical opponents, Gojo can simply deny them even touching him with Invulnerability. He can take absolutely no damage and so removes one of the threats that he would have to deal with in the case of an opponent with extreme amounts of cursed energy, but no refined technique to use that with. Psychic Scream represents Gojo's 0.2 second domain expansion, amped up with just enough to cause extreme damage and stun his foes with an intelligence saving throw to resist it. If you are worried about civilians, you can very much cast Hypnotic Pattern instead. And finally, for level 20, we get our 18th level of Wizard, and we obtain Spell Mastery as an ability. The first spell we shall master is Absorb Elements. If not from a direct attack, how about an indirect one? Well, not this time. If it's a spell, that will already be half damage on Gojo thanks to spell resistance, that advantage on a save to half again, and then if the damage is still too great, we can use a reaction, half it one more time. In practice, this means that we can still tank the likes of a meteor swarm without gracing our foes with the benefit of our worry. I know that taking shield could also be an interesting option, but the reason why we took Absorb Elements here is because shield lasts an entire round and so requires a little bit less casting than Absorb Elements. Not to mention, at this level, saving throws become a lot more common than enemies attacking with martial attacks. Misty Step will be our 2nd level mastered spell. At-will teleportation makes sense since Gojo is always extremely fast and could easily use this technique to bend space, and so affect time as well to pass around or even go through certain objects and obstacles. For spellcasting, we get another slot at 5th level, and we complete our spells with Meteor Swarm and Wish. Meteor Swarm is Gojo's final version of a 200% hollow purple by arranging the meteors in kind of a line. If you line up the meteors and make them overlap a little bit, you end up with an 80-foot wide, 200-foot long line of pure destruction. Creatures in that path will take 20d6 fire damage and 20d6 bludgeoning damage from debris falling all over the place. Wish, on the other end, is the single most versatile spell in the game, but we will have some other spells to duplicate with it. Before we get into those, there is an important use of Wish, the ability to ask for an effect not covered by any spells. For Satoru Gojo, when our final fight is truly getting desperate, we can destroy a part of our frontal lobe and regenerate it with reverse cursed energy to recover our burnt out Limitless. To replicate this, simply wish that you gain the benefit of an undisturbed long rest right now. In exchange for this game-breaking benefit, your DM and you can rule that you lose the ability to use Wish instead of any monkey's paw shenanigan. Additionally, the necrotic damage we take from this use of the spell can be flavored as the nosebleed Gojo gets from the brain damage caused by so much cursed energy usage. In the end, if your final fight of the campaign is particularly tough, this final use of magic can ensure that anyone will recognize you as the strongest, should you not become a Kit Kat. Now for the spells that we can replicate Heal, Aura of Vitality, or Beacon of Hope to allow Gojo to recover hit points, either instantly or over a long period of time, using reverse curse energy. Regenerate also allows Gojo to grow back a recently sliced off arm. Hallow expands on the effect of Gojo's domain expansion by making his foes vulnerable to psychic damage inflicted by maddening darkness, while stacking debuffs all throughout. Freedom of movement allows Gojo to recover from any movement impairing effects by simply that they touch him. Contingency will be the final spell, as this allows Gojo to create elaborate responses with his curse technique to ensure that no matter the situation, he remains safe above all by pushing harder enemies that are trying to drive past his Limitless. In the event a counterspell fails, you can always keep another counterspell stored up to truly deny Jujutsu sorcerers that think they can challenge you, because no one can challenge the Honored One. For Gojo's pros and cons, we will begin with the pros. Gojo's build is extremely versatile by virtue of Gojo being an arcane spellcaster such as a wizard. He is also extremely defensive and very hard to surprise due to his expertise in perception and having the observant feat. With the fact that we started with some monk levels and have access to Tensor's transformation and several other defensive buffs, this makes Gojo a very capable melee fighter, along with a terrifying domain expansion that can shut down spellcasters extremely hard. He also has multiple health bars and counters to make sure that his opponents don't try to get a one-up on him. Not to mention, Gojo is also resistant to spells and has advantage on saving throws against them, making him incredibly difficult to beat when facing off against another sorcerer. For cons, Gojo has extremely weak concentration, which doesn't really ever get triggered until he takes damage on his actual health bar. Saving throws are also not the strong suit of Gojo. When someone tries to mess with his mind or remind him of a long-lost close friend, Gojo will usually get tricked. Damaging options for Gojo's build, like Hollow Purple or several applications of red, or even blue, will only come online later on in the build, making this build a bit more viable at a higher level. And lastly, Gojo is quite difficult to play effectively, as we have a lot of defensive options and they all are rather dependent on context. So if you need help to play this build, make sure you ask your table to help you out with what spells to cast, or make sure that you prepare very well before going out on an adventure. And that's it for this episode of How Would You Build, focusing on the Honored One, Satoru Gojo from the show of Jujutsu Kaisen. I hope that you've all enjoyed it, and that you agree with me on some of these build decisions. If you have different opinions, or if you prefer to build Gojo as an actual sorcerer, or maybe even a strange little bard, you can totally do that as well. Feel free to drop your character suggestions using the 2014 rules or the 2024 rules down in the comments. Feel free to maybe even drop suggestions with homebrew classes. Maybe do a little subscribble if you want to see more of these builds, because that is definitely the single best way to tell me that you want to see more of these lore accurate builds. And I will be seeing you all very, very soon, be it here on Discord or maybe even on my coffee, for more cozy little D&D builds and more lore accurate characters. Be well, stay warm or cool, and see you all very soon for the UG build. Bye bye!